Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between. Cliff Williams and Joel Jackson. I'm not sure what I'm going to put in the subtitles for us this time. If you haven't noticed, I put like a weird random thing. And
the little.
We'll figure that out. In the news today, this is the Not Gospel. In the news today, I'm going to pull out the journal and get this rolling right. I think my mic might be a little hot. Hold on.
A little bit hot. Just a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
In the news happening right now, as we speak. Very interesting stuff, and I pulled this from CNN, the Clinton News Network.
Oh, gosh.
So you know that it's accurate. You know that it's nonpartisan if it's from CNN.
I'm going to watch the Democrat references today. I edited the last one, and I was like, man, Joel, come on, bud.
All right, so Brandon Mitchell was a juror in the case heard around the world, the Derek Chauvin, George Floyd. It was the trial of Derek Chauvin.
Yes.
Brandon Mitchell is now standing possibly accused of juror misconduct. Shortly after the trial and after the verdict,
yes.
Pictures surfaced of him in a BLM hat and a shirt that said, "Get your knee off my neck," referencing George Floyd's death. This picture was taken at last year's March on Washington.
In jurors, they're basically not supposed to have any type of leaning towards anything, so he didn't let them know that.
Right, so the reason why this is important is, because jurors are supposed to be typically non-biased. They're supposed to be proof that they're non-biased. Well, in a case this big, I mean, everybody heard about what happened to George Floyd. Most people saw the footage. So in a case this big, it's difficult to guarantee that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So they asked two questions. These two questions were asked of all potential jurors.
Okay.
Did you or anyone else close to you participate in marches against police brutality that took place in Minneapolis after George Floyd's death? It's one question. And to this question, Brandon Mitchell answered no.
Oh.
He had not, and at this point he's not wrong, right? Because he hadn't participated in marches against police brutality in Minneapolis, because the march on Washington was in Washington.
Okay.
Then the next question pops up. Other than what you have already described above, have you or anyone close to you participated in protest about police use of force or police brutality? To which he responded, no.
There's the problem.
And if you're at the March on Washington, it was very much it was supposedly about the anniversary of Martin Luther King, 50 something, I'm not sure, but it was very much about police brutality. There was several people. It was Reverend Jesse Jackson. I think he was saying that there was a time to march for freedom of slaves. There was another time to march for the right to vote. Now is the time to march against police brutality. Essentially, is what he said. Now, he may or may not have used the word brutality, but he definitely called out police in that announcement. So even experts interviewed on CNN. Now, the reason why I say this is because, again, CNN likes to keep up the pretense that they are non-partisan. But, I mean, what do we know? I don't know. Even experts interviewed on CNN say this could be grounds for an appeal, which makes sense. He's still going to be found guilty, I think, in my opinion, of manslaughter or something, even if they have an appeal or a mistrial. He's still going to be found guilty, but maybe the jury won't quit their deliberations so quickly, because it was 12 hours and they came back with a 3-week trial. It was a 12-hour decision.
Well, if they found him, if the general public was not happy with the decision, that jury was in trouble.
Oh yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing to me about this. So the interesting thing to me about this, Joel, is the fact that this story, the first that I saw about this story was Ben Shapiro and Tim Pool, which check out Timcast IRL. It's super, the guy's great. Inspiration to me. Very, very, very good commentary. But Ben Shapiro from the Daily Wire and Timcast and more conservative outlets, they were on this story in seconds. And here's the deal. This story, this is the biggest trial there's been in years. We talked about it. Highest profile trial that we've seen in years. The fact that conservative outlets and non-mainstream outlets were the first ones to broach the story, and it was days later that CNN and all these mainstream outlets are starting to finally talk about the story.
Yeah,
it's very interesting to me. You know what I mean? Because it's like this is the highest profile trial we've had in a long time. If this juror, if images had come out of a juror with a shirt that said "Free Chauvin," Chauvin was innocent, or something like that, this would have been on the. In my opinion, now. This would have been on the headline of every major news network.
Yeah, you know that story came to them, and they were like, "This hurts the narrative."
Well, and that's what it feels like. It's like maybe it's like they're crossing their fingers. Like maybe the conservative networks won't grab onto this story, and if they don't, then we don't have to talk about it.
It's so weird. It doesn't surprise me anymore that like there's some big, dark, weird objective from the media anyway. That's not even like, as we're talking about it now, I'm like, oh yeah, the media did that. That's normal.
Makes perfect sense.
That's
based on the state of journalism and the state of the media today. Well, it makes me wonder how long people just sort of, I guess, forget about or pretend that they don't see these big major news networks ignoring these stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah, my problem is like, when you push towards an objective that is so controversial as a leftist ideology or a far right ideology, you're going to select things that you want people to hear. Rather than the whole story, you're going to select stuff that pushes the narrative forward, and that can lead towards a false story or not the whole picture, which can lead towards a wrong conviction or something like that. And that's what I think is dangerous.
There used to be a thing called journalism, and now there used to be a difference between journalism and activism, and now it's like every journalist is an activist.
Yeah,
it's nuts.
It's a religion.
Dude.
I said that like an Irish person. It's a religion.
It's a religion. Healthy. I
see
you've got your coffee there. It's
social
healthy.
Social justice and activism. It's a religion, man.
These people, wrong.
These people are more and this is something for Christians to look at. These social justice warriors and activists, dude, they're a lot more wild about it than a lot of Christians are in their faith.
Oh, you're not wrong. Done with the first page already.
Take that.
Take that. All right. Just recently, I saw an interview on Bill Maher. Bill Maher had Megyn Kelly on his show. And typically, I wouldn't imagine Megyn Kelly would ever be on Bill Maher's show because she's, much more right-leaning. And Bill Maher, and a lot of most issues, would consider himself left-leaning, on a lot of stuff. He had Megyn Kelly on the show because she had pulled her kids out of their New York private schools. She had a couple of boys in an all-boys private school in New York, and then a girl and a girls' private school in New York, and she pulled her kids out because of the anti-racism stuff and the transgender curriculums that they were pushing. And it's not only her. Bill Maher went on to say that he had many friends of his who were parents, who were mostly liberals, were doing the same thing. They were pulling their kids out and going to homeschooling.
Did you see last night, whatever you want to call it, Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner was on Fox News in an interview. People are seeing this far, because the left has control of everything. There's going to be a backlash.
She's
Caitlyn.
Formerly known as Bruce, now Caitlyn.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
She is running. Caitlyn is apparently planning on running for governor of California.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
Well,
as a conservative.
Yeah, man, this is where the pronoun thing is interesting because I'm like, Caitlyn was talking about the bad state of California, but it's like, I feel like 4 years ago they would not go anywhere near Fox News. Just
to be clear, in my opinion, since Caitlyn, formerly known as Bruce Jenner, is a biological male, I do believe this person to be a male. I feel like the biological markers are relevant, despite how they feel emotionally. But for the purposes of not offending Caitlyn,
I don't want to make anybody mad.
I'm going to refer to this individual as their name and by their preferred pronoun, probably. Just so we're clear. All right, so did that. Right in the camera.
Yeah,
Anywho, so yeah, again, weird, super weird.
It's because the left has everything, and they're going, no pun intended, they're going too far.
They're going extremely left.
A lot of the liberals I know, dude, they're like, they have no idea this is going on.
And in my opinion, it is my job to tell my kids that everybody's made in the image of God, that regardless of whether we're white, red, brown, black, whatever, we're made in the image of God, and we are judged by our word and our deed and our character. That's my job. The school's job is not to teach my kids that because you're white, you treat people badly. Because you're white, you're going to get special treatment. I, first off, don't want my kids believing that. I want my kids knowing that regardless of their skin color, they're going to have to work hard to get what they want.
And because you're white, you are this, but we don't really have a verifiable way to prove this non-implicit bias or whatever, racial bias.
Right.
There's no way to really, you can name some examples, but give me the data, and there's no data.
If it's unconscious bias, that what people have said, if it's something you do unconsciously, there's nothing you can do about it. And Megyn Kelly was saying that in a lot of cases, this force-fed anti-racism stuff, when you bring it to the forefront at a young age, any latent racist ideas that a young person would have, they're seeing those getting pushed to the frontal lobe, and they actually start acting out that racism because it's being taught to them, force-fed them. You know, I can imagine if I was a young kid of color and you told me that police were more likely to kick the crap out of me or to brutalize me or to treat me unfairly, I'm going to grow up with resentment to police. Taught resentment, institutionally taught resentment to police, which is going to further strain relations between police and minorities. It's going to. You're foolish to think it won't. But that anti-racism stuff is supposed to be a cure for racism.
Jesus is the cure for racism.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Jesus is the cure for racism. If you're a creationist and you believe that God created the entire world for us, and you believe that he created man in his image, then every single person, regardless of your color, race, or creed, is precious in God's eyes.
That's right.
Period. End of story. Not to get too Sunday school for anybody, but if you don't like that, or if you have a problem with that, please tell me about it in the comments. I would love to ignore your comment.
Jesus created
I'm just kidding. I would love to answer your comments. I'm just teasing.
Jesus created the T-Rex. He's like, no, don't eat that. All right, hold on. I got to make another animal. Hold on. That should be I'm working on a Christian comedy routine. I got this one I got this one joke where you die and you get to the gates.
You only have one joke? You've got way more
No,
than one
I've got one. You die and you get to the gates of heaven and God comes up to you in a cold sweat and he hands you a headset. He's like, I need you to run drive-through.
I saw a meme where this guy comes up to heaven and he's like, St. Peter's like, you have to get forgiveness from everyone you ever killed.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, that's easy. I've never killed anybody. And he goes, video games count too. And he turns around and like all the people.
All the kill count. That's amazing.
So I'm going to do a little deep dive. So the source of this black versus white narrative, the idea that white supremacy is the biggest threat facing our nation today, which I find absurd.
It's laughable.
You know, and maybe I'd have more credibility to say that if I were black, I guess. I don't know. So here's where it comes from. Mm-hmm. It's an adoption of Marxist ideology.
Okay.
So according to Karl Marx, Karl Marx is considered the father of communism because he and Engel, they wrote, and I'm probably saying Engel, it's Engel or Engel, they wrote the Communist Manifesto.
And communism is basically...
communism is essentially another way of
distributing wealth,
another way of governing that's based on a set of predominantly economic ideologies. Yeah. And so in some of the tenets of communism, as demonstrated by the Communist Manifesto, the first thing is that it breaks everyone into two categories. It's a binary class system. It breaks everybody into the haves and the have-nots, oppressed and oppressor. Or in the time of Karl Marx, it was the bourgeoisie and the proletariat.
Okay.
proletariat were the poor people that were working. They were like your minimum wages type things, if you want to reference today.
Yeah. They're at White Castle.
The bourgeoisie were the landowners, the
realtors,
the billionaires today. Let's say the billionaire business CEOs would be kind of an example today. Here's where, so this black and white tension, what this is and why I think Marxist ideology, economic ideology, and race relations, and the idea that America is more racist today than it was back in the times of slavery and stuff like that. The reason why these things are connected is because you have big organizations like the BLM. Black Lives Matter is led by self-proclaimed Marxists. The main faces of Black Lives Matter, they say we are trained Marxists. Also, there's information out there suggesting that 1 out of every 5 college professors at the university level, identifies as a Marxist. And these college professors, what's happening is they're teaching young adults to hate capitalism, and I've seen it. I can see it whenever you mention it. Whenever you have an economic discussion with somebody who's trained at the college level, at the university level, and they say, "Oh, capitalism, am I right?" And it's like sarcasm, like capitalism's horrible, it's evil, it's vile. They're trained to hate capitalism because capitalism's not perfect. I admit that it's got a bunch of flaws, obviously.
It's like strongest person wins, basically. Even like with my current potential deal with Mikey, we're going to be going to labels, and we are working like dogs to get the best songs possible.
Capitalism creates both wealth and misery. The other systems we've tried have only created misery, no wealth.
Yeah, because communism didn't work.
That's the thing. Even people that are looking for a 21st century version of communism, big minds that are pro 21st century communism will admit that 20th century communism, the communism we saw in Stalin's Russia, Mao's China, that it failed hard.
Why does it fail hard?
Because some of the principles in communist ideology,
I think
they depend on a certain amount of altruism.
It goes against human nature.
A certain amount of human virtue. Like they're teaching. Okay, so in the universities, they're teaching people these 1 out of 5 university level professors are teaching young people to hate their own country and to hate capitalism because we're a capitalist country. United States, there's almost no more capitalist country than United States. So they're teaching them to hate their own country.
Well, to do that in America, I said this earlier, it's kind of like living in your parents' mansion, but complaining about the mansion.
About the wealth of your mansion. Yeah.
And it's like, dude, like you don't really have a leg. If you go to a different place, I promise your perspective might change.
So what happens is, and according to the Communist Manifesto, what you do is it calls for a violent revolution, and it calls for a tearing down of the bourgeoisie or the oppressors, and then all of a sudden the oppressed, or the other class, if you got a binary class 1 and 2, the second class comes up and you elect dictators and rulers from among that secondary class, and then they rule and they govern themselves. And the idea or the hope is that because they're the oppressors, there's virtue, or they're the oppressed. There's this virtue in being the oppressed. There's this virtue in being poor, and because they're not the evil ones, they're the good ones. When you elect the leaders from them, everything's going to be better. It's magically going to be better.
Yeah, I went down to the Louisville riots for Breonna Taylor just to film to let people on Facebook know that in fact the city, it was not just peaceful protesters, it was getting destroyed. Yeah, I would not trust that group with anything.
Come on, man. You wouldn't let them house sit your house and watch your dog?
No, they would steal everything, and it was all races down there.
Dude.
It was all of them. The white people were the craziest.
And that so what is happening now is this Marxist ideology is working its way into social justice, and the binary class system is becoming all people want to talk about. People on the left and the modern liberals, I call it neo-Marxist liberals. Neo-Marxist liberals are portraying white people as the bourgeoisie, the oppressors.
Have they been to Ohio?
And black people as the proletariat or the oppressed. And they know the importance of this narrative. They're like, if we can just keep pushing this narrative, shove this narrative down in people's throats, till maybe we'll have the violent revolution that they had in communist Russia. That's what we want.
What is the motivation?
The problem is, though, when you break people, when you class people with just two, like those who have and those who don't, you don't leave any room for any in between. So what happened in Russia was that there were a lot of farmers that were of the poor people. They were of the proletariat. They had worked their way out of the muck and the mire and had become landowners and earned a living, and they were hiring now other people who were in the proletariat, some of the common people
first.
And because being landowners and having was considered unvirtuous and was considered part of the bourgeoisie, the proletariat murdered those farmers and their families.
It's just, like I said, I've said this before on the episode. This is why I jump back to the Jesus stuff, because social justice and all that stuff, it's based on that, man. That's where it leads. And if you can't see that, then you got blinders on. How do they know it's not going to end up that way? What is this modern what do they say? What's their argument?
I've watched interviews and lectures of intellectuals on both sides, those who are for communism and those who are against it. I've yet to see a genuine communist who's like, or a socialist, and socialism and communism are very close, who, I'll just say a Marxist, someone who believes in Marxist economic principle and ideology. I've yet to see them defend and explain a new wave of communism or a new wave of socialism or a new wave of Marxist ideology that doesn't depend on some sort, at some level, a degree of altruism and selflessness that human beings do not demonstrate.
What's the motivation for people once they have everything?
Well, we're seeing that now, that because they're giving people so much money on unemployment, all the fast food joints have now hiring signs.
We ate out last weekend, and it took forever to get the food because they
don't have the help. It's wiping out middle businesses. The lockdowns are wiping out middle businesses, and what's happening is the government is providing for the people in almost a socialist style.
Here's what I think that's happening, because you could look at society today and say, oh, maybe we're getting better because like the Crusades or whatever, anything.
Yeah.
But you look at like World War II, and you look at everything on the news, and I don't think we're getting better. I think our technology is getting better.
Yeah.
I don't think we're getting better. And so that's where that argument of like, I would think a communist might be able to say, well, look at society. It is getting better and better. I don't know, man. There's still some...
The thing about capitalism is, there's a quote from Winston Churchill that I love. He talks about democracy, and he says that democracy is a terrible way. I believe it was Churchill. He said that democracy is an absolutely terrible way to govern anybody. It's a terrible way. It has its faults, unless you compare it to all the other ways we've tried to govern people. Once you compare it to all those other ways, democracy looks like the best way. Or as I say, and pardon me if this offends anybody, the shiniest turd in the toilet. In the same way, capitalism is wrought with faults. It's there is opportunity for the people that are rich to get even richer, and for poor people to even suffer. And there's less government guarantee. Like there's not universal health care. There's not all these things. So capitalism does pave the way for some very bad things, economic displacement, and the like the super rich versus the super poor, like that economic dispersal to continue to get wider. It does make way for that. But free market economies, capitalist economies, are a terrible way to do your economy, unless you compare it to every other way we've tried so far.
What, like these people that are so into the Marxist thing, do they just really care about social justice? Or like, I don't understand being super passionate about, like, granted, I'm not super passionate about capitalism. What I am passionate about is understanding that humans are not good.
You're not super passionate about it because you're an oppressor. Okay? Look at yourself. If you own a mirror, you're white, bro.
Yeah, but you own a mirror, so you can't say that to me. You know what I'm saying? I'm not
You're
saying.
right. The fact that I own a mirror means that I am an oppressor. Because there are people out there that don't have mirrors. They just find shards of glass on the side of the road, and that's their mirror. How dare you? You got mirror privilege.
Mirror privilege.
I can't even fake that.
Well, here, hold on. Let's kind of dig into that. So, okay, hold on. Let's dig into this. Let's do this.
I'm ready.
How do you suppose that I fix that? Tell me. Tell me steps. I don't want giant broad strokes. I want a steps.
Okay.
Convince me.
All right. So the idea is that you band together. Well,
Okay.
according to Marx, what he suggested was that you band together
Okay.
and have a brutal, violent revolution. That's what he said. Calls for a violent revolution. The Communist Manifesto calls for a violent revolution. And
What does that look like? Do we go? Okay.
Oh, dude, in Stalin's Russia,
Yeah.
tens of millions of people died.
This is what I do when someone, I would say, attacks like that towards like an idea. I just make them explain everything. Okay, so
Okay.
what is a modern 21st century violent revolution look like? Like, does it look like murdering people? Because that's not good.
I think we've seen it for the past year. A small encapsulized version of it. We saw jurors who felt threatened for a guilty verdict in Derek Chauvin. We've seen a year of life loss, of people throwing bricks at police and acid laced smoothies or whatever they were, the milkshakes that had bleach in them, and all this stuff that they've thrown at police and police figures. And we've seen buildings burning. So we've seen the tip of the iceberg of what it calls for. What was it? The NFAC, the Not Effing Around Commission.
Yeah.
We saw our coalition. We saw them running around with automatic weaponry or semi-automatic weaponry.
Okay, so do you leave your house at night and do you go murder a bunch of people and come home and tuck your kids in at night? And then you tell it, because that's the example you're setting for your kids.
Dude, well, you think about it like this. Most of the activists are the college agers.
They don't have experience. They don't have life
kids.
experience.
And a lot of them don't have jobs. And this sounds very judgmental. And I know it sounds judgmental. But
you have to explore.
they don't even know
Okay.
that George Soros has funneled $33 million into the BLM.
I get this all the time. I run a recording studio and someone will come in and be like, man, I'm going to get a record deal. Man, I'm going to get signed. Like, let's, and I'm like, okay, well, how do you want to do that? And they're like,
Have no plan.
we're just going to do it. And I'm like, no. How are you going to do it? Okay, you need to go around the town. You need to find yourself 4 dudes that can play in your band.
We're going to go fishing and we're just going to pull out a record deal.
It's not. You need details, so you have to explain this plan to me that works with human nature, because this communist thing does not seem to work with human nature.
To me, it's an exercise in narcissism, and what I mean is you've had the 20th century communism completely failed, utterly failed. Over 100 million dead bodies between Stalin's Russia and Maoist China. It's awful. Communism cost more lives in the 20th century than and I'm going to get flack for this, than Hitler and Nazis ever dreamed of taking. You can look it up. Do your history. Check it out. Check out your history. It's fact. If you challenge me on it, you do the history and then you write in the comments whether or not I'm right.
That's right, jerk.
Come on.
I'm kidding.
There's a guy out there or a gal out there like, challenge accepted. I really hope. And yeah, so it fell on its face. It miserably failed. 20th century communism. There's no reason to believe that it shouldn't fail if they try it again. The only reason they have is, well, we are smarter now. We are better now. We have learned from our mistakes. So in other words, the most brilliant minds of the previous generation totally bombed in this idea, but because we're more brilliant now, we're better now, we are going to get it right.
What if someone doesn't want to? Okay, communist society. Here's just my questions. What if someone doesn't want to work? What happens to them? What if they refuse to work? Do they get shot?
People starve. When the proletariat murdered all these farmers and their families, there was no proficient farmers. So people starved. There were posters in Russia in that time, reminding people that it was immoral to eat their children because they were starving.
But what I'm saying is, like, when we have this utopian society that every Marxist would claim we can have, what about the people that don't want to work and they refuse to work? What does the government do to them?
I mean,
there's going to be people that refuse to work. What does it do to them? What if they don't want to go be this and the government makes them do it?
You have to give up.
I need details. That's what I'm saying.
You have to give up some degree of freedom of choice in order to accomplish this thing. Like, you have to, I believe.
So do we murder them or put them in a camp? That's like that.
They don't do either.
No, that's what I'm saying. They need,
I know what you're saying.
If you're going to argue for that, you better have an answer, man. I don't think these people do.
The argument is, you don't understand. When all these basic needs are met, people are just going to naturally work to better themselves and better the world.
That goes against all 20,000 whatever years of current human history, whatever you believe.
Absolutely.
So that's why I'm saying I don't believe it.
Dude, I said, there's no argument for communism I've ever heard that doesn't require some degree of optimistic altruism and selflessness of people.
Cliff, the fictional communists currently,
all right,
could potentially be right, but all of human history is completely against that thing. And that's why I'm standing on this side, because while you could be right, I use this tactic all the time with people I'm arguing with. While you could be right, the evidence is wildly on this side.
I know, dude. Here's the deal. If you can make the binary class system about factors that you cannot help, about like your race, black versus white, then it makes it easy to identify. It doesn't matter that I may or may not be working my butt off to have anything I have. The reason I have what I have is not because I work my butt off. It's because I'm white. Automatically, I'm in the bourgeoisie, or I'm in the oppressors category.
I'm trying to find like a category for like what making those accusations are, but it's like there's no way to defend, oh, well, you're white, you're an oppressor. Well, hold on. That's such a broad statement. Dude. You have wealth, you're an oppressor. Stop. We got to go dig deeper than that, because why are you saying that? That's what I would say.
And in its core, to be honest, in my opinion, it's racist. It's racist. Look at the Koch adopted anti-racism thing. Try to be less white. Being white is being ignorant. Being white is being aggressive. Being white is... It's like, that's racist. It is racist.
Yeah.
You know. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. If you enjoyed this episode, do the liking, the commenting, subscribing, hit the bells and all that jazz, and keep being awesome.
Yeah.
Because that's how he made you.